Essendon's official injury list is out. We're going to have a bit of a look at that, given that we have a week off in preparation for the game in gather-round against the Demons, and not just listing the injuries, but we're going to have a look at what it means and the likely return dates for some of these players and how they're going to return, specifically if they're going to come back straight through the seniors or through the reserves, and potentially how that's going to affect the lineup against the Demons and after that against the West Coast Eagles and then Collingwood. So for starters, as I posted yesterday in my video, Tom Edwards has done his ACL at training. He'll be out for 12 months. We don't really need to go into too much more detail about that. We discussed it yesterday. It's very unfortunate. He hopefully will retain a spot on the list, but obviously these things are not certain now. You just don't know what's going to happen with him. So he will be out for a period of 12 months and certainly will not play any further part in the year. The next one, Angus Clark. Now, Angus Clark injured himself in the VFL game against Werribee. He came off in the first quarter. He had 2 or 3 possessions and he has injured a collarbone. So he didn't take any further part in the match after he went off. Collarbone injuries, can be anywhere between sort of 3, 4, 5 weeks, something like that, maybe even a little bit longer. Angus Clark, of course, was the player who won a lot of the time trials during the pre-season. So it looks like he's got a pretty big tank on him, and he was outshining a lot of the senior players in terms of his running capacity. So he's definitely a player that we'll be keeping an eye on, but he won't be playing football probably, you think, for another month or so. Unfortunately, yesterday was a bit of carnage at Essendon training.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
Jye Caldwell was the next one. Jye Caldwell is going to have a scan on his hamstring today, and we're going to see how bad that is. So hamstring injuries can vary. Obviously, a minor one can be 1 to 2. You can have the ones like Kyle Langford, where he has a 4 to 6 week injury. Caldwell does have a bit of a history of soft tissue injuries and hamstring injuries, so you'd think they'd be pretty cautious with this. Obviously, we have the bye, and then we play West Coast the week, then we play Melbourne, and then we play West Coast the week after the bye, and then Collingwood. So hopefully it's only a 2 to 3 week injury, but you just don't know. I think the problem with this is that no matter how bad or even minor it is, because of his history of these type of injuries, the club is going to be fairly conservative with Jye Caldwell, and he's had such a good start to the season. He's arguably been our best player. You could make that call, or at least second best player. He was certainly that game against Hawthorn in round 1 was probably as good a game as anyone's played this year. So they'll probably be pretty conservative with Jye, I would imagine. But certainly I doubt very much he would be playing against Melbourne, and I'd say his earliest return date at this stage would probably be West Coast, and even that would be unlikely, and he might be pushing it towards Anzac Day. Anzac Day, as we speak, is 23 days away. So depending on the severity of the injury and the scans, it sort of puts him on the cusp of returning to that. If you like this content, please hit the like button and the subscribe button. It helps the YouTube algorithm. It will ensure that you never miss a video. It doesn't cost any money, and it takes 1 second to do so. It would help me out a lot if you could do that. So if you could just click that subscribe button right now, I would really, really appreciate it. Matt Guelfi's next.
Oh, that guy, remember?
So we're kind of missing Matt Guelfi down there as a bit of that sort of forward that is not necessarily the key forward, but someone who can sort of kick those 1 to 2 goals. He's still 5 to 6 weeks away. He had surgery on his hamstring back in February, and he'll probably be available in the second half of the season. 5 to 6 weeks, obviously it's a bit longer than that in reality, because once he is back, he'll probably be required to play a couple of games in the VFL to acclimatise himself back to football again. So you can extend 5 to 6 out to more like 7 to 8 weeks, I would imagine, till he's back. So we won't be seeing till the second half of the year. Nick Cox is still suffering with his concussion. This is one of those ones that you just want to get right. It's still 2 to 3 weeks away. He's suffering from still lingering symptoms from the pre-season concussion. So this has been an ongoing problem with him. This is just something that you don't want to be playing around with, anything to do with the head. It's annoying that he can't get on the park. Obviously, he was one of our top 10 draft picks in that what appears to be a ill-fated draft in 2020. But we want him out there. But you want to make sure that he is right. You don't want to be taking any risks with anything to do with the brain. But he's probably 2 to 3 weeks away at this stage from playing senior football. And like the others, you'd suggest that if he does come back, he's probably going to come back through the VFL. Peter Wright is the other. Peter Wright is going to be out for another 2 to 3 weeks. The annoying thing from Peter's point of view is that with Langford out and with also Tom Edwards now out for the season, this could have been an opportunity for Peter Wright to come into the side. It appears that Peter Wright is a bit out of favour and probably might have struggled to get into the team this year. I don't necessarily think he was in the coach's plans unless he played a few blinders in the VFL or unless injury determined that he might come into the team. Look, I still think there's a role for him to play. He's a very accurate kick. He is a reasonable mark sometimes when he's in form. He does tend to spill it. We tend to get frustrated that he can't take one. But, when he plays that one good game every 3 or 4 weeks, he can sort of win a game off his own boot. And we saw him do it against Carlton on the first King's birthday game. We saw him do it against the Bulldogs in an empty stadium back during the COVID years. He's still got the ability, but it's just unfortunate for him that his injury seems to have suffered at the most inopportune time at a point where he may have been able to come into the team this week, but he won't be. He's still going to be another 2 to 3 weeks away, so his return date could be somewhere around Anzac Day or that week if he was to be selected in the senior team, which he may not even be. But there's a good chance he could be if Langford, who is another probably 3 weeks away, and obviously Edwards is still going to be out, there's a chance that Peter Wright's return, if Langford's not back, could certainly coincide with us needing him in the side. So it'll be interesting to see what his availability is and what his form is like, because we do tend to get a bit frustrated with Peter from time to time. But, really, we could actually do with him this week. He's probably the type of player that, may have been able to play a role against the Demons on Gather Round had he been fit. Archie Perkins had a quad. He missed a week, and it might have been a 1 to 2 week injury, but given that we have a bye, he looks like he will be available. He suffered that in round 2. He will be looking to return for Gather Round. His form, as usual, has been a little bit mixed. He played a really good second half against Hawthorn. I think he had about 16 possessions in the second half. So it's always a bit of a mixed bag with Archie, but look, I think he will be back into the team. Brad Scott has always been pretty conservative with his players. You have to play pretty poorly to get dropped sometimes from this team, it feels like. So the same players do tend to get selected, and I'd suggest that Archie Perkins will be back in the team, as will Elijah Tsatas. Tsatas broke his hand during the warm-up. I've heard of these injuries before. They sound serious, a broken hand, but they don't normally keep you out very long, would you believe? Broken hands often only keep you out for 1 to 2 weeks, and Tsatas broke his hand in the warm-up of the game against the Crows and still had 25 touches. I don't think he had a great game, but he's still managing to get the ball. And I've noticed in both the games that he's played, he's only played, I think, 58% of game time in one and 67% of game time in the other. So he's still finding the ball. Obviously, his disposal is still the issue with him, and it perhaps will be for a little while. But he, I imagine, will come back into the team this week. And given that it was only a 1 to 2 week injury, this week against the Demons, the week after, he'll be back in there. But his injury, I think, is not serious enough that it will keep him out of the next game. Next, we've got Kyle Langford. Kyle, of course, did his hamstring in the opening round against Hawthorn. Quite a serious one, 4 to 6 week injury. We're now at a 3-week return date for Langford, so that puts him on the cusp of returning for Anzac Day against the Pies. So we'll see how he goes. I think he will come straight back into the team. I don't think Kyle Langford will be playing reserves. So hopefully he'll be back for Anzac Day. It's pretty much when he's due back. Lastly, we've got Darcy Parish, and this is interesting, Darcy Parish. He was ready to, well, maybe not ready, but he was on the cusp of returning via the VFL last week, and the club said not quite. He still had some lingering back soreness. So the club elected to not play him in the VFL.
He is not coming back.
And just not take any risk, which is sensible. You want to be pretty conservative. You want to make sure he's right. If there's any sort of lingering back issue, you don't want it to flare up again and then he's out for another month. You just want to make sure you're 100% right. So I think the plan for Parish now is for him to play a couple of VFL games and then have him play in the seniors. I think he probably needs maybe 2. I think that would probably be a sensible thing. But what I find interesting about this is that the VFL side doesn't play this week because they have a bye. Then next week, the whole of the VFL has a bye because there's a competition game between the VFL and the SANFL. So the next VFL game that the Bombers actually play is on the weekend of the week that we play the West Coast Eagles on Saturday the 19th of April. So Parish actually can't play any game at all for another 17 days. There is no VFL game for him to play until that date, the 19th of April. So I think the plan would be for him to get 100% right. No worries about him getting injured in the VFL because there are no games. Plays in the VFL on Saturday the 19th. And then he's either right to go against Anzac Day or they give him another game in the reserves and he's right to go the week after that. So I don't know whether the lack of action that the VFL team is seeing, given that the VFL team has 2 weeks off now without a game, has been a factor in the decision to not play Parish last week, because if he had played, then he would have played one game and then he would have had to sit on the sidelines for 2 more weeks before the VFL team play again. So if they get the 2 games into him, that means he would probably be back the week after Anzac Day, or maybe if they consider that he's a good enough player, they would probably just play the 1 game in the VFL and have him back for Anzac Day. So that is the injury list for the Bombers. I would have a suspicion, just looking at it, hopefully we don't pick up any more at training, that we'll probably have Caldwell and Edwards coming out of the team, obviously, because they're both injured. I don't necessarily think there'll be any other people come out of the team just looking at it. The team played pretty well. A lot of the players who we consider to be the sort of fringe players had some of their best games, like Archie Roberts, for example, had the highest pressure rating game of any Essendon player this season. So players like that, who we consider to be sort of on the cusp of selection, played well enough to keep their spots. So I'd suggest that Tsatas and Perkins will probably come into the team for Caldwell and Edwards against the Demons in a couple of weeks. Hopefully in the next 14 days or so, we just don't pick up any more injuries. So anyway, that's the injury list for the Bombers. What do you guys think? Do you have any views on what the selection will be against Melbourne, or any views on how these players should be brought back, how conservatively they should be brought back? What do you think they should do with Parish if he's right to go? Remember, there's no VFL game this week or no VFL game next week. So what should they do with him? Just should they give him the 1 game and bring him back for Anzac Day? That's sort of what I'm leaning to, but I have a feeling they might go the 2, just because he's had so much time away from football. So I'm going to leave it at that. Hope you enjoyed this video, everybody. Please subscribe to the channel and hit that like button. It helps the YouTube algorithm when you do that, and I would appreciate it if you could. And as always, have a great day and go Bombers.